The air smelled of wet pine and fading summer blooms when Emily Carter adjusted the strap of her daypack and stepped out of her gray Subaru, parked neatly along the cracked asphalt of a trailhead deep within Rainview National Park in Northern California. It was late August 2014, the sort of afternoon that hummed with cicadas and distant wind, the sun dipping low enough to send long bars of orange light across the tall redwoods. Emily had always come here when life felt too loud. She knew every turn of the Ravens Loop Trail by memory. At 28, she carried herself with that easy strength that came from years of outdoor runs and hikes after long shifts as a pediatric nurse in Santa Rosa. Her friends often teased her that she loved the woods more than people, and Emily would laugh, tucking a loose braid behind her ear. But her eyes always softened when she looked at the trees. That morning she had texted her younger brother Ryan, a college student living 2 hours south, telling him she needed a quick escape before her overnight shift started again. Just a loop around Ravens. Back by dinner, she wrote. Ryan responded with a thumbs-up emoji and the familiar warning he always gave. Stay safe, Emmy. Signal's bad out there. Emily had packed light, a blue hydration pack, her phone fully charged, a small camera dangling from her neck because she liked to capture wildflowers and odd shadows in the woods. She wore her favorite gray running shoes, the ones with the frayed laces, and her silver pendant, a gift from her late mother, rested against her collarbone as she set off down the trail. Several hikers remembered passing her in the first mile. A couple with a golden retriever noted how she smiled and stepped aside to let them through. Another pair, older birdwatchers, recalled her crouching near a patch of lilies, snapping a photograph. The weather was calm, the trail dry, and nothing unusual stirred in the forest except a rustle of deer deeper in the brush. When Emily didn't return home by nightfall, her roommate Cara first assumed she had stopped for dinner with friends. By 10 p.m., worry twisted into a pit in her stomach. She called Emily's phone. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. Cara texted Ryan, "Have you heard from her?" Ryan hadn't. He tried not to panic, but by midnight, after several unanswered calls, he drove to the trailhead, heart pounding as he scanned the empty parking area with a flashlight. The Subaru was still there. The driver's side window was rolled up, the doors locked, her water bottle still wedged in the cup holder. By dawn, rangers had joined Ryan and Cara, walking the first mile of the Ravens Loop with voices raised. Emily. Emily Carter. Birds scattered from branches as searchers pushed deeper into the trees, finding nothing but morning mist and the soft drip of last night's dew. A scent dog caught her trail for a time, but lost it near a rocky switchback overlooking a steep ravine. No shoe prints beyond that point. No broken branches, nothing. Her backpack was not found. The local sheriff's department set up a command post in the gravel lot, tents sprouting like mushrooms as volunteers arrived. Maps of the park spread across folding tables, marked with highlighters and notes. Helicopters thumped overhead, blades churning the warm air. Ryan stood with his hands clenched at his sides, watching teams disappear into the green depths. He kept thinking about her silver pendant, how she never took it off, and how absurd it felt to be staring at her locked car while the woods swallowed her whole. News vans rolled in by late afternoon, reporters whispering about another hiker gone missing in the vast wilderness. Locals spoke in hushed tones about how the Ravens Loop had always felt strange, how compasses sometimes spun oddly there. A retired ranger muttered that the forest keeps its own secrets. That evening, as the search expanded, Ryan sat on the hood of his sister's Subaru, phone in hand, scrolling through their last messages. He stared at her final text, "Back by dinner," and felt a wave of dread crush him. The forest beyond the trailhead stood silent, shadows deepening as dusk fell. Searchlights swept through the trees, beams cutting across dark trunks and empty air. Somewhere out there, Emily had vanished as though the earth itself had swallowed her, leaving behind nothing but questions and the uneasy feeling that the woods were watching. The next morning the forest awoke to the roar of helicopter blades and the shuffle of boots on damp earth as dozens of volunteers, rangers, and deputies assembled at the Ravens Loop trailhead, their radios crackling with clipped updates, while the rising sun poured light through the branches and threw long shadows across the gravel lot. And Ryan stood among them with a grim face, gripping a printout of Emily's photo, repeating to anyone who would listen that she knew these trails like the back of her hand. She would never have wandered off willingly. She had promised him she'd be home before nightfall, and the search coordinator, a veteran ranger named Alvarez, with sharp eyes and a weathered voice, drew lines on a laminated map, dividing teams into sectors, explaining that every crevice, every gully, every deer path had to be checked, because out here a person could vanish between one heartbeat and the next. And the first K9 unit arrived, a sleek black German shepherd named Rook who bounded out of the truck with a low whine, nose already sweeping the ground for Emily's fading scent, while the news crews hovered like vultures at the edges of the command post, their cameras capturing Ryan's pale face and the sight of Emily's Subaru still parked, untouched, as if waiting for her to return. The first sweep of the Raven's loop revealed little beyond broken twigs, where the initial teams had pushed through the night before, and the dog handlers urged patience as Rook sniffed along the rocky switchback and abruptly lost the trail near the same ravine where they'd lost her scent the previous day, and some searchers rappelled down the steep slope, shouting her name into the shadows below, hearing nothing but the trickle of water and the distant call of a hawk, while others combed the undergrowth near the lily patch where the birdwatchers had last seen her crouching, hoping for a clue, a dropped camera, a torn shoelace, anything to say she'd been there after that moment, but the ground was clean except for animal tracks and fallen leaves. By noon the air was heavy with humidity and frustration, tempers frayed as a deputy reported a potential lead. A hiker claimed to have seen a young woman matching Emily's description around 4 p.m. the day before near a side trail that forked east. But when teams followed that trail they found only a scattering of cigarette butts and an old campfire ring. And the witness later admitted he wasn't entirely sure about the time, or even the person. He'd just seen someone in gray moving fast, and as the hours dragged on, the volunteers pushed deeper into sectors labeled C and D, sweating under the canopy, while mosquitoes whined around their ears, while Ryan remained at the base, refusing food, scanning the horizon with wild eyes each time a team returned empty-handed. Rangers on horseback joined the search by late afternoon, their animals picking carefully through dense brush, while drones buzzed overhead capturing thermal images that showed nothing more than deer bedding down and squirrels darting across logs. And the search coordinator gathered everyone for a quick meeting, his face drawn, telling them they would continue until dark, then resume at first light, because survival odds dropped with each passing hour. In a moment of desperate hope, Ryan and Kara convinced a deputy to let them search near a remote picnic site Emily had loved, and they trudged through knee-high ferns until their legs ached, calling her name into the trees, their voices hoarse, their ears straining for any sound beyond the wind through branches. But the only thing they found was an old trail marker with peeling paint and a length of faded ribbon tied to a tree that neither of them recognized, fluttering in the breeze like some forgotten sign, and Kara stared at it with tears brimming, whispering that maybe Emily had left it. Maybe she was trying to mark her way. But Ryan shook his head, the knot in his chest tightening, because he couldn't believe his sister would ever get lost. Not here. Not on this loop she'd hiked a dozen times. As dusk descended again, lanterns lit the command post, casting pools of light on maps now cluttered with X's and question marks, and Alvarez spoke softly to Ryan, telling him they would widen the search tomorrow, bring in more dogs. But Ryan heard only the silence of the dark woods stretching beyond them, a silence broken only by the occasional crack of a branch or the distant echo of a name shouted into nothingness. And he looked up at the shadowed hills, feeling the terrible vastness of the forest pressing in, a green and black labyrinth that could swallow a person whole without leaving a trace. And as the searchers packed up for the night, one deputy lingered by Emily's car, running his flashlight over the interior again, over the water bottle, the trail maps tucked in the door pocket, the faint smear of dirt on the driver's seat, and for a fleeting second he thought he saw something glint beneath the passenger seat. But when he crouched and reached under, his fingers touched only a penny, tarnished and warm from the day's heat, and he let it fall back with a sigh, unaware that somewhere deeper in the woods, hidden beyond sight, a clue waited, small and silent, holding the first thread that could unravel the entire mystery. Weeks bled into months, and the forest, which once felt like a living, breathing ally in the search, became a heavy and indifferent presence as the trail markers faded under summer sun and then autumn rain, and the command post at Ravens Loop dissolved piece by piece until only a warped bulletin board remained, layered with weathered flyers showing Emily's smiling face beside the words missing in bold black letters, and Ryan drove there often, parking beside her untouched car until deputies finally towed it for safekeeping, staring into the woods as if sheer will might bring her back, and Kara clung to him, organizing vigils and social media campaigns, begging for tips while strangers online dissected the case with wild theories about secret caves, transient camps, or even alien abductions, their comments alternating between cruel certainty and hollow sympathy, and the sheriff's office issued sparse updates, admitting they'd exhausted leads, their case files thick with witness statements and aerial photos but thin on evidence, so the search was officially suspended though never closed, and that word, suspended, hung like a stone in the family's chest. Winter draped the park in snow, erasing every trace of her footprints, and Ryan would hike out alone, with a heavy jacket and thermos, retracing every step she might have taken, whispering her name into the brittle air, feeling the ache of futility growing sharper each time he returned empty-handed, and Kara began leaving small wooden crosses at trail junctions, each carved with Emily's initials, tiny memorials that hikers stumbled upon months later and posted online, reigniting brief waves of attention that faded as quickly as they came. A year passed then too, and Emily's absence became a hollow rhythm in the lives of those who loved her, her room left untouched, her favorite mug still in the cupboard, and on anniversaries Kara would post long letters addressed to her sister, begging for a sign, while Ryan sat with investigators who still took his calls, but offered only tired reassurances that cold cases sometimes broke wide open years later with a single new clue. The online forums buzzed with every rumor. One week convinced a man arrested 3 states over might be linked, the next chasing reports of a torn jacket found by hunters that turned out to belong to someone else, and in the midst of it all a new incident flickered into the headlines. A teenage camper vanished from a nearby trailhead in late spring, prompting a brief surge of coordinated searches that brought the spotlight back to Ravens Loop, though the teen was found alive within days, disoriented but unharmed, and when the searchers returned empty from Emily's sectors yet again, Ryan felt his hope fray further, realizing the forest had yielded nothing despite their relentless efforts. Over the years the park changed. New signage warned hikers to travel in pairs. New ranger patrols swept the trails more often, and some locals whispered that Ravens Loop was cursed, that too many people had gone missing in those hills, but none could name another victim beyond Emily. And as time stretched on, Ryan's visits grew less frequent though never stopped, his life folding in on itself with quiet grief, while Kara married and moved to a nearby town, but still carried her sister's photo in her wallet, touching it before bed as a silent promise not to forget. Even Alvarez, the veteran ranger who had led the initial search, retired with a furrowed brow, telling a reporter in a rare interview that Emily's disappearance was the one case that haunted him, that he often woke at night imagining her alone in those woods, injured or worse, and though he had seen enough tragedies to harden his heart, this one refused to let go. The case files gathered dust in the sheriff's archive, yet every so often a deputy new to the department would flip through them, feeling the weight of the unsolved, tracing their finger over the faded map coordinates, wondering how someone could vanish so completely in a place so thoroughly combed, and beyond those walls the forest kept breathing, seasons rolling over mossy ground, wildflowers blooming and dying, rain carving new gullies, and somewhere within that vast green sprawl lay the answer, silent and patient, waiting for the right moment or the right set of eyes to bring Emily's story back into the light. Years after the official search had been called off, when the flyers had yellowed and most hikers on Ravens Loop no longer remembered Emily's name, the breakthrough came in the most ordinary and unassuming way. On a late summer afternoon, when the air shimmered with heat and the distant buzz of insects filled the forest, as Harold, a retired schoolteacher with a bad knee and a gentle old spaniel named Daisy, wandered off the main trail following a deer path he hadn't noticed before, just looking for a quiet spot to rest his aching legs, and Daisy, with her nose twitching at some hidden scent, trotted ahead into a tangle of underbrush, barking sharply, a sound that startled birds into flight and made Harold hurry despite the pain in his knee. And when he pushed aside the brambles, he saw it. A faded blue backpack half buried under layers of pine needles and soil, its fabric frayed, zipper rusted, and beside it, a single hiking boot tangled with moss, its laces snapped and curled like brittle twine. And Harold froze, gripping a branch for balance, his pulse quickening as he realized this was no ordinary lost item, not in this remote hollow far from the marked paths. And with trembling hands he pulled out his phone, snapping photos before calling the ranger station, his voice shaking as he described the location, unsure if anyone would even believe him. Within hours, the clearing swarmed with uniforms and gear, rangers cordoning off the area, while crime scene techs crouched in the dirt with tweezers and cameras, bagging fragments of fabric, a tarnished pendant that glinted faintly in the dappled light, and strands of hair caught in a zipper. And whispers rippled through the team as one of the younger deputies recognized the pendant from the old case file, a small silver leaf charm that Emily's sister had described in heart-wrenching detail years ago. And as the news spread through the department, phones lit up with calls to Alvarez, now retired but still sharp, who drove out within hours, standing silently over the scene, with arms folded, the weight of memory pressing down as he watched the evidence bags fill. Forensics vans arrived, techs in gloves brushing soil away from fragments of bone nestled deeper in the ground, delicate and yellowed with time. And as each piece was cataloged, the tension grew, the realization settling in that after so many barren searches the forest itself had finally offered up a clue. And Ryan, upon receiving the call, drove like a man possessed, parking near the familiar trailhead, breathless and wild-eyed as he pushed through the brush to where the investigators worked, his hands clenching into fists at the sight of the backpack he'd seen her carry countless times, now dirty and broken but undeniably hers. And Kara arrived soon after, her knees buckling as she took it in, tears carving silent trails down her cheeks as she whispered Emily's name into the hot, heavy air. The clearing was combed inch by inch, ground-penetrating radar brought in to skin deeper layers, cadaver dogs circling, tails stiff as they sniffed the earth, occasionally whining at the scent. And each small discovery, a cracked lens from a camera, a strip of sun-bleached fabric, tightened the knot of suspense among the team, fueling both hope and dread as they realized they might finally have enough to spark new leads. Samples were rushed to the lab, DNA rushed through expedited channels, and within days a partial profile was generated, cross-referenced with decades of databases. And when a match pinged unexpectedly against a secondary profile, someone previously questioned as a witness in a different case, a hush settled over the task force, followed by a flurry of late-night meetings and strategy sessions, the renewed energy palpable as seasoned detectives and fresh recruits pored over old interviews and overlooked details, their whiteboards filling with names, maps, and timelines. The story hit the local news like wildfire, reporters camping outside the sheriff's office, microphones thrust forward as spokespeople carefully confirmed that new evidence had been found in connection with Emily Harper's disappearance, but refused to comment further. And the public, once numb to her name, suddenly felt the old unease creep back, parents pulling children closer on trails, hikers moving in pairs, whispers of a predator hidden in plain sight, threading through the small community. The sense of suspense only deepened when a fragment of fingerprint lifted from the cracked lens narrowed their focus to someone who had long seemed innocuous, a man whose name barely registered years ago, someone living quietly on the park's edge, his routine so ordinary that few had given him a second thought. And as investigators dug deeper into his background, they unearthed troubling patterns, reports of women feeling watched on trails, sightings of him near the loop on the day Emily vanished, details that now, in the harsh light of new evidence, took on a sinister clarity. Ryan and Kara were kept in the loop as best as protocol allowed, sitting in sterile offices, while detectives explained the significance of the DNA, the circumstantial links, the need for patience as warrants were secured and surveillance established. And though their hearts ached to know more, they clung to each word, feeling the first fragile threads of hope in years. The forest, once a silent accomplice to mystery, now seemed alive with secrets eager to be uncovered. every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig hinting at stories buried just beneath the surface, and as the sun set over Raven's Loop that evening, painting the canopy in molten gold, those who had never stopped searching felt a collective shiver of anticipation, knowing that after years of darkness the path ahead, however painful, was finally beginning to show itself. ChatGPT. In the weeks that followed the discovery in the clearing, the investigation took on a feverish intensity that none of the veteran detectives had felt in years, with Alvarez brought back as a consultant and younger agents shadowing him as they built a timeline around the man now quietly under surveillance. A park maintenance worker named Leonard Hayes, who had lived alone in a weathered cabin on the outskirts of the state forest for nearly 15 years, a man described by neighbors as polite, but distant, always willing to lend a hand but never inviting conversation, and every evening after his shift, he was seen walking the trails with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, his gaze fixed on the ground as if scanning for something only he could see. And as the task force pieced together his records, they found a string of oddities, reports of him changing jobs suddenly, moving from one park to another after incidents never fully explained, and receipts for supplies that matched gear found near Emily's backpack, all circumstantial but enough to justify deeper digging. Unmarked cars began to park near his routes, plainclothes agents blending in with hikers as they trailed him at a distance, noting how he would often pause by secluded clearings, kneel as if tying his boots, eyes sweeping the woods as though listening for someone following, and at night, through high-powered lenses, they watched him sit on his porch under the dim glow of a single bulb, whittling small wooden figures, each one disturbingly shaped, like a hiker mid-step, lined up along his railing, like silent sentinels. When the DNA from the backpack was confirmed to have traces of Hayes's sweat mixed with Emily's, the mood in the command center shifted from grim determination to charged anticipation, and warrants were drawn up quietly, a plan forming to bring him in without alerting him. But they needed more, something to tie him irrevocably to Emily's disappearance rather than mere presence on a public trail. So they pushed harder, digging through old case files, interviewing former co-workers who recalled his odd hours and his tendency to volunteer for night patrols in remote sectors, and one ranger, now retired, remembered finding Hayes near a closed section of trail years ago, his hands dirty and his answer about why he was there unsettlingly vague. Meanwhile, Ryan and Kara lived on a knife's edge, every phone call from the department quickening their pulse, every evening spent staring at the map of the forest, tracing the trails Emily loved, whispering her name into the quiet as if she might somehow hear. And one night Kara couldn't sleep and began scrolling through old photos, pausing on one where Emily grinned in front of a stone outcrop, the pendant gleaming against her chest, and she realized the background matched a spot near where the backpack had been found, a detail she immediately sent to Alvarez, who added it to the growing tapestry of evidence. Surveillance continued, tension mounting as Hayes grew more erratic, staying out longer on his walks, sometimes venturing off trail with a shovel and returning hours later with mud on his boots. And one night, he was followed to a ravine where he stood motionless for nearly 30 minutes, staring into the darkness as if lost in memory, before abruptly turning and heading home, his breath visible in the cool night air, his face unreadable. The team debated moving in immediately, but Alvarez insisted on patience, knowing they needed an airtight case, and so they waited, watched, documented, until one fateful dawn when Hayes loaded his truck with supplies and drove not toward his usual work site but deep into the forest, parking near an old fire road, his behavior suggesting a visit to some place known only to him, and the agents followed at a distance, stepping carefully over roots and stones as he hiked in silence, finally arriving at a narrow crevice between boulders where he crouched and began digging with methodical precision. The team's radios crackled softly as they coordinated, surrounding the area quietly, hearts pounding as they prepared to confront him. And when Hayes suddenly froze, glancing over his shoulder as if sensing them, Alvarez gave the signal, and they emerged from the trees, weapons drawn, voices firm as they ordered him to drop the shovel and raise his hands. And for a long moment Hayes didn't move, his eyes sweeping the circle of agents, a faint smile ghosting his lips before he complied, slowly, lowering himself to his knees, the morning sun filtering through the branches, casting dappled light across his weathered face. As he was cuffed and led back through the forest, his cabin was raided, agents combing through the cluttered interior, pulling up floorboards to reveal hidden caches of personal items, bracelets, hair ties, scraps of clothing, some labeled with dates and initials in a meticulous hand, a chilling catalog of lives interrupted, and among them photographs of Emily, candid shots clearly taken without her knowledge, her unaware smile frozen in time, her figure walking along familiar trails, and the sight of these images hardened the resolve of everyone present, the horror of what they'd stumbled upon deepening with every drawer opened. News of Hayes's arrest spread quickly, reporters descending on the town, neighbors expressing shock that the quiet man who trimmed their hedges could harbor such darkness, while Ryan and Kara sat numbly in a conference room as detectives explained what they'd found. How Hayes had been interviewed years ago, but dismissed due to lack of evidence. How he'd lived undetected, weaving through the very places Emily had loved. And though the pain was unbearable, there was also a sense that answers, long denied, were finally within reach. Hayes remained silent through initial interrogations, his eyes calm, almost serene, as if he alone knew some unspoken truth. And as the forensic teams continued their work, processing soil from the dig site and cataloging every item in his possession, Alvarez promised Ryan and Kara that they would not rest until every stone was turned, every secret unearthed. And though the forest outside remained as vast and mysterious as ever, there was now a crack in the silence, a path forward carved by persistence, grief, and the faint but growing light of justice drawing near. The atmosphere in the interrogation room was thick with tension as Leonard Hayes sat unmoving, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the sterile walls, his hands folded neatly on the table as detectives took turns laying out the evidence, photographs, DNA reports, witness statements, each detail painting a damning portrait that slowly closed in around him like the dense forest that had witnessed his crimes for weeks. Hayes had maintained a chilling silence, speaking only in monosyllables, but behind that quiet exterior lurked a mind unraveling. And then, one late evening, after hours of relentless questioning and the weight of undeniable proof pressing down on him, he finally began to speak, his voice low, devoid of remorse, yet disturbingly calm, weaving a narrative that revealed the depths of his obsession and the fractured psyche that had driven him to prey upon those who ventured into the wilderness he called home. He spoke of loneliness, of feeling invisible in a world that overlooked him, and how his need for control had manifested in twisted rituals, capturing glimpses of his victims' lives through stolen items and secret photographs, clinging to them as if preserving fragments of a connection he could never form openly. He confessed to luring Emily off the beaten path under the guise of offering help, his intentions dark from the start, driven by a desperate urge to possess rather than harm outright. But the encounter spiraled beyond his control, culminating in violence he tried to repress even in confession, and though he admitted to disposing of her remains in a concealed cave deep within the forest, the precise location remained elusive, a haunting game of cat and mouse that left investigators scrambling. Meanwhile, Ryan and Kara endured the agonizing wait for closure, their days filled with a mix of hope and despair as police combed the forest with renewed vigor, guided by Hayes's fragmented recollections and the expertise of forensic geologists who employed thermal imaging and soil analysis to identify areas where decomposition might have occurred. After weeks of grueling searches, a hidden cavern was finally uncovered beneath a thicket of brambles and moss-covered rocks, and inside the remains of Emily were found, her bones scattered but unmistakably hers, accompanied by personal effects including the silver pendant she always wore, its tarnish softened by time and earth. The recovery brought a bittersweet relief to the family and the community, who gathered to honor Emily's memory in a memorial service held at the park's entrance, where favorite wildflowers bloomed in abundance, and speakers recounted her love of nature, her infectious laughter, and the indelible mark she left on those who knew her. Local officials pledged to increase safety measures within the park, installing better signage, emergency call boxes, and increasing ranger patrols to prevent future tragedies, transforming the site of loss into a beacon of awareness and vigilance. Hayes's trial became a national spectacle, with prosecutors detailing the chilling pattern of his crimes, including evidence linking him to other disappearances, while his defense attempted to paint a picture of a deeply troubled man driven by mental illness. But the jury was unmoved, delivering a verdict that brought a measure of justice for Emily and the others, sentencing Hayes to life imprisonment without parole. Yet, the story did not end there. Ryan and Kara, though shattered, found solace in advocating for missing persons, using their platform to support families enduring similar nightmares, their grief channeled into purpose, while the forest, once a place of dread, slowly reclaimed its role as a sanctuary for hikers and nature lovers, its trails echoing not only with footsteps, but with the resilient spirit of those who refused to forget. The improbable chance of discovery. An ordinary retiree walking his dog, a buried backpack, a faint scent leading to answers, reminded all involved of the fragile interplay between chance and persistence, where justice, though delayed, can ultimately prevail. And as the seasons changed, the story of Emily's disappearance and the relentless search for truth became a poignant testament to the enduring power of hope amid darkness, a narrative woven into the very fabric of the land she loved forever, etched in memory as both warning and inspiration.